doing a login, I'm first going to go into Access and I'm going to set up my database, my table. So I'm going to call this DB login. I'm going to browse and put this into my folder. So that's going to go into my Tuition 2021 folder for grade 11. And I've got a folder called login. I'm going to change this now to a 2000 format, DB login 2000 format. Okay. And I'm going to say create. So I've created my database. Now let's go into design view. My table, I'm going to call TBL login. Right. Now let's create a couple of fields. So the first field, I'm going to call this login ID. That's my primary key. I'm just going to keep it as an auto number. Now, login, some user is logging in. So that person will have a username. So my field is going to be username. Short text, I don't like to leave it at 255. I'm going to keep it at 20. So there's going to be a username, there's going to be a password. Right? So the person, when they log in, they're going to log in using their username and password. Password is short text. I'm going to restrict that to 20 as well. So at this stage, I want to ask you the question. Do you think we need any other fields when I'm designing my login form? Now you have to give this some very careful thought, because keep in mind that you've got different people who are going to be using the system, in the sense that you've got somebody who's an admin, and the admin person must see different forms from somebody who's an ordinary user, who when they log in will see a different set of forms. Based on what I've just said, do you think we have all the fields that we need to be able to identify all our records? Go ahead, guys. Karan?
We have the login ID, which identifies every individual, the username, and the password.
Ultimately, on a login form, the person needs to enter a username and they need to enter a password. On a login form, that's a typical login form. It requires a username and a password. But I want you to think beyond the username and the password. Beyond that requires me to know, or requires the system to know, which form to bring up depending on the type of user that is logging in. Josiah?
So would you need a field to distinguish between an administrator and a general user?
100%. We need another field that I can check that will allow me to determine what role this user has. So I'm going to create a field called role, and I'll keep it of short text 20. Now by having this field role, it gives me rich information, important information. Right? It gives me important information. So let me save this. And let me now double click on the table and let's populate this table with some information. So I've got this username let's call this username. Usernames usually they need to be unique, although I know the login ID is unique, but they're not going to use their login ID to log in. They'll use their username, and I'm going to type in an email. So let's go winnie@gmail.com. That's the username. The password is Winnie with a capital letter W. And the role of Winnie is just a normal user. Okay. And then I'm going to go tigger@gmail.com. And the password will be Tigger with a capital letter T. And Tigger is an admin. And then let's add one more. Right, one more user. Piglet@gmail.com. And Piglet is the password. And Piglet is just an ordinary user. So I've got three users. Two of them are just ordinary users, and Tigger is the admin. So Tigger must see a screen that's different from the two users. I'm saving these three records. Okay. So I've created my login table. Now I want to go into Delphi. And once I'm in Delphi, I will connect to this table. And then I will log in and see how this works. So let's quickly do that, right? I'm going to go in here. There we are. And I need to add some controls. I'm going to add two labels. And I'm going to add two edit boxes. The label is simply going to say enter the username. The second label is going to say enter the password. The edit box, I'm going to click on both of them. I'm going to hold the shift key down. So I select, you'll notice that both the edit boxes are selected. And I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to look for the text property. There we are. And I'm going to take it out. So all of them will go at one go. So it just saves you a little bit of time. Click on the first edit. I'm just going to change the name. Right, the name property. And I'm going to call that EDTUN. UN is for username. And I'll call this EDTP for password. And I need a button. And the button is going to be login. So I'll just change that caption to login. And I'll change the name to BTN. Okay, there we are. Right. So, if I run this, there's no functionality. So you're going to type some username like that, winnie@gmail.com, who's logging in, and then they're typing in a password. So immediately when I look at this, okay, I need to improve my program because a password should be coming up with stars. People should not see the password I'm typing. So let's quickly go and fix that. On this password edit box, there's a property called password character. There it is. Right. Password character. So I'm going to click there and I'm going to put down a star. I'm going to type star. You can decide what character you want to use. So by putting a star in there, when I run it now, and when I type the password, you'll notice it's typing in stars. So that looks more authentic in terms of the actual login screen. And also, I think another thing I should try to do is centralize that form. It just looks better, especially if you're doing it for a pet. So look for the property called position. There it is, found it. There's a property called position, and I want to go to change position. Just momentarily lost it. I want to change it to desktop center. So changing that to desktop center, and now when I run it, that's automatically centralized, right? So it's starting to take shape. I think because I'm doing this for a pet, that doesn't look nice when it says form 2. So let's quickly just click on the form, and the caption, it should say login. So that's that looks a lot more professional. Now I need a second form, because when I type the username and password, it needs to take me to the second form. So I'm going to create another form, file, new form. That's what I'm creating, right? And I'm going to put a label on that form. Sorry, not an edit. I'm going to put a label. And the label here is, I'm changing the caption. I'm going to say, this is the user's form. Okay, so if I come to this form, the user must come to this form. Now let's create another form. Right, so now I've got a third form, and every time I create a form, you will notice that a unit is being created automatically. Okay, for every form, there's a unit associated with it, and the unit is where we go and we write our code. So when I click on that, that's where all my code is sitting. Right. So here I'm going to add a label as well. And in this caption, I'm going to say, this is the administrator's form. Is wrong. Right. So now we've got 3 forms. First, I'm going to click on login. Right. If I run this, I click on login. So depending on who is logging in, so if Winnie is logging in, if you remember from the database, the data I put into the database, Winnie was a user. So when Winnie logs in, Winnie needs to see the user form. Right? So Winnie needs to see the this form here. Tigger logs in. Remember, Tigger was the administrator. Tigger will actually see this particular form. So they are seeing different forms, and on each form we'll have different functionality, different buttons that allow them to do different things. A typical example, I would not want to give a user a delete functionality. Delete functionality is sensitive because you are deleting records. I would restrict those type of functionalities to the administrator. Okay, so this is what we are typically trying to do. We're trying to do a login, and when the person logs in, the program needs to be intelligent. It needs to be intelligent. Oh, you are a user, so I'll call up one form. You are an administrator, I'll call up another form. We want to develop code that makes our program intelligent, and that's not difficult to do. Okay, so let's just do a quick login. I'm going to first get the value for the username and the password. So I'm going to put in a variable sun, right, and sp for the password of type string. So, and I'm going to store the value for the username that I'm getting from the edit box. So edt username.text, this is what the user types, and password is going to be edt password dot use. The user is going to type, right? The user is going to type their username there and their password in there. And once that is typed in, I take the values and I store them in my variables. And I just want to work with those variables. Okay, so I've got their values. Now I want to check their value against the value in the database. Right, so let's do that. I'm going to use the with statement. So I'm going to say, oh, I have not set up my data module. I've set up my forms. Let's set up our data module because I'm linking to a database. So let's do that. So I'm going to click on File, New, and I'm going to go to Other. And I'm going to select data module. There we are. And I'm going to add my 3 components. Audio connection. Right, that's the first one. Set a connection string to the table. Then I'm adding an audio table to get the information from that table. And then the third one I need is a data source. Right, so there's my T data source. Okay, let's configure these. Double click. Let's build our connection string. I'm using the Microsoft 4 Jet because of the way I saved my database. It's the 2000 access format. I'm going to go and search for my database. My database is in a folder called login. There it is here. This file is in use. It's saying that because I've got the database open. It doesn't like it when I have the database open. I don't need to close access. I just want to close that. And it should be fine now. When I select it, it's still unhappy about that. Let's try it again. I want to go to login. Okay, so it's complaining about that. I'm going to have to close access completely. Let's do that. Now let's go and browse. And I'm going to go back into the login folder. Oh, there we are, right? So now it's allowing me to use the database. I'm going to take out the path because the database is sitting in the same folder where my project is. Test the connection, works well. I need to go to advanced. We don't want it to share deny none. That creates problems, we know that. I want it to be able to read and write to the database. Click on OK, click on OK. And then let's just go and set some other properties here, like the login prompt, right? I want the login prompt to be set to false. Then we go to the table. With the table, I'm going to look for the connection property, and I'm essentially linking the audio table there to that connection. Now that the link to the connection, if I look for the table, it's going to find my TBL login. And I want to set the active property to true, so it will show the records that are in that table. Then I go to the data source. In the data source, I look at the property data set and I link that to the table. So I start off with this connection. I link the table to that. I link the data source to that. So it's structured in a way where each component is linked to the other. Now that I've done that, I can now work with the database because I've got a connection to it. So I'm going to go with, right? Well, I forgot to do one more thing. I want to now, usually we sometimes put a grid on the form. I'm not putting a grid on the form. I'm going to be just working with it. Sometimes just for testing purposes, you'll put the grid and you may want to delete it later. Maybe we could do that. So I'm just going to move these components lower down. Just for testing purposes, I'm going to put in a DB grid. There it is. Right. There we are. And I'm going to now link the data module. I want to link it to this grid here. But in order to do that, obviously, I want to add to my users section because the data module is sitting here and it is unit 4. Just to double check, there's unit 4 here and that is my data module. So I've added my unit 4 and now when I go to the data source property on the grid, remember I'm still on the grid, data source property, and I will find my data module. So there we are. That links nicely. So I can now go with my ADIO, with my what is it? With my, I didn't rename my data module, sorry. So it's with data module 4. It would have been a good idea to rename it. Begin. And what do I now want to do? I now want to locate this username. I want to locate that username and see if it exists. So I'm going to use the locate statement. If ADIO connection1 dot locate, ADIO connection1 dot ADIO. I need to get to the table. Why am I saying it's not the connection? ADIO table, sorry, with ADIO table1 dot locate. Locate has 3 parameters. The first parameter is the field that we want to locate in the database, which was called username. Right, I think. Okay, I'm going to have to be absolutely certain or it's going to give me an error. And that could be another reason why it's useful to have the table here. So you can just, if you want to refer to your field names, you've got the field names available to you. So it is username. So that's the first parameter. The second parameter is what I'm searching for, SUN. So this value here that the user types, I'm checking if that value is contained in that field of the table. And the third parameter, we use these square brackets like that. And we want to check if this is equal to true. If it equals to true, it found that particular username in the database. Well, that's good. If it found the person in the database, that means they are authentic from a username point of view. Let's double check if their password is also correct in the database, right? I could know your username, but the password, I may not know your password. So I'm now going to check for that same record that was located. I'm going to check if ADIO table1 square bracket, and I'm going to check the password field. I'm going to check if that password field is equal to SP. Here, SP is what they typed as their password, and I'm checking their password with the password that is in the table, provided that the username was located. If the username was located, then only I'm checking the password. And if it is a match, then just for testing purposes, I will put show message and otherwise I'm going to put, well, it depends. 2 errors could have taken place, right? 2 errors. If I put an else here means that means that the username was incorrect. Okay, let's put a block around this. You'll be able to see it very nicely. There's the if, there's the end, there's the else. So this else means that it could not locate that. Therefore, the username is incorrect. But now, if I put an else here, this else, I need a show message to say that the password is incorrect. So if I put a block now around this, you'll see the if else there, right? So if this fails, if it's equal, that means the password is correct. Otherwise, the password is incorrect. And if the username is incorrect, then it tells you that the username is incorrect. So this is just something, a little skeleton we can just test at this stage. Let's just see if we got some functionality working. Let's just type in something that's totally not in our table. And I click on login and it tells me the username is incorrect, right? Because the outer if, the locate is not finding that. Now let's go and type Winnie at gmail.com. Now Winnie is there. It needs to find this. The password is just any nonsense that I'm typing, right? So it's not the correct password. When I click on login, it tells me the password is incorrect. Okay, it tells me the password is incorrect. So it means it's locating this, but it's having a problem with the password. So now let me type the correct password with the capital W-I-N-N-I-E, Winnie. And now at this stage, it's saying correct, which means it's detecting a correct username and it's detecting a correct password. Okay, so that's the nice thing about this. We've got a little login going where it's checking for the username, it's checking for the password, and it's doing the right thing. It's working. So that's a little exciting from that perspective. Okay, so there's just checks that I'm making. Now I want to take this one level higher. I want to raise the bar. Okay, because remember, we've got these two forms. And if the person has logged in correctly, let's bring up the correct form for them. And that is why the database structure was so important. Remember, we put in a field called role. Because I've got that field called role, I can check that field and determine what role that user has. So I'm going to be working here. Because at that stage, I know that the username is correct and the password is correct. So I'm going to make some space there. That was just for testing purposes. I'm going to take out that show message and let's put in a comment to say that username and password is correct. So that's just a comment for our purposes. Once I'm at that level of my code, my username and password is correct. I now want to check the role. So I'm going to do something very similar. If table 1, and let's check the role. I've got a field where I say role, and I've got two roles. The one role was admin. I hope I think like that. Okay, if I'm unsure, that's why it's useful to have the table. I can go back and check how I stored the values and make sure you are consistent in how you type your roles. A better way would have been to use numbers for roles. Like a 1 could have been a user and a 2 could have been an admin. The reason why I consider using numbers to be better It's because when you type, you could make spelling mistakes. But if I misspell user, for example, and that's going to create inconsistencies in your table. So if you use numbers, that could be a better idea. Okay, but nevertheless, I'm looking for a user and I'm looking for admin, ADMIN. It's small letters. I don't think it would make a difference even if I used capital letters. For now, let's just look for a small letter. And as such, pull up the admin form. The admin form was what? Form, that's a user form, and this is the admin form. And the admin form is form 3, which means I need to call up form 3. So let's get back here, and I'm going to say show or I need to say the name of the form, which is, in my case, form 3. Now, immediately, if I try to bring up my IntelliSense, I'm going to have a problem with that because I'm trying to call up form 3 in this form. So the same thing that we did with the data module needs to be done here, right? We need to add in the users for form 3, which is unit 3. So I need to add that in. But I can show you a trick here, right? If you don't add it in, if you forget or you don't add it in, sometimes purposefully you cannot add it in and click on run, then it comes up with this telling you that you've created there's a reference and it's missing this unit 3. Do you want to add it? And we can just say yes, and our problem is solved. And if you look, Delphi adds it here. In the implementation, it put the users form 3, but if you went and wrote it in here as well, it would still work. Okay, so this is exciting now because we've got the role for the admin. We're saying form3.show. Okay, great. Let's put in another check. Else, if I'm looking for a user. Bracket the role again, and if that equals to a user like that, then begin. If it's a user, then I want form 1. Which form was that? I think it was form 1. There it is. That is the user form. So I want to show form 1. So I'm going to say form1.show. Again, I'm not going to put the users in. I'll just add the reference in like that. And we're now good to test. We're now good to test our code. I'll just take out the lines, right? Remember, here it means the username and password is correct. I check the role, and depending on the role, I call the respective forms. Quite a neat way of doing a login. Let's see whether this works, right? I give it a run. It's compiling. That's good. Compiling means it's free of syntax errors. Let's go for Winnie. Right, I'm going to go with Winnie. Winnie is a user. Winnie at gmail.com. Password is a capital WINNIE. So it needs to bring up form 1 if it works correctly. Log in, and nothing is happening. It's not bringing up form 1. So that means there's a problem. It's not telling me anything. Okay, so that's a little, we need to go back and figure out what that is, what's going wrong there. Let's try Tigger. Tigger at gmail.com. And the password is TIGGER, capital letter T, when I click on login. So that worked. There we are. That worked. It brought up the administrator's form. Okay, it did bring up the administrator's form. Right. And it didn't work for Winnie. So let's just try this one more time. Winnie at gmail.com, and the password is WINNIE with a capital W. And when I click on login, it's not going to work. I can see it now why it's not going to work. Look at this pointer. If you look at the pointer here, the pointer is sitting at this particular record. So when I click on login, locate is going to start locating from that point onwards. And I suspect it's going to. So when I click on login, nothing happened. Nothing happened. And the pointer has now gone back to the top. The pointer has gone back to the top. But if I click on login now, I suspect it's going to work. No, it's not working. Haha. Okay. Right. So let me go back to my code and let's figure out what's going wrong for the user. The admin works. So when I enter Winnie and I enter the password, it checks the role if it's admin, user. Now with user, maybe let's try lowercase. Okay, let's try lowercase because I've got lowercase there. And let's put this in lowercase because it's searching. It's probably case sensitive. It should be case sensitive. And now let's give it a try. Winnie at gmail.com. And capital WINNIE. And I click on locate, and there we are. It was an issue of case. It was an issue. So this is the user's form. Close that, right? Let's go to Piglet. Password is PIGLET with a capital P. Click on login. Username is incorrect. Oh, that's because I forgot to put at gmail.com. So we can see the program's working. That's great stuff. Click on login, and there we are. Piglet is a user, so that worked. And let's go for Tigger again. Tigger at gmail.com. And I'm going to go Tigger, login, and Tigger brings in my admin form. So this is how you would go about doing a login application. Guys, talk to me.
Is there a way to do it without having to show the DB grid?
So once you've got the login to work, it doesn't make sense to have the grid. So you would take the grid and you would delete it. And after deleting it, if you click on your program, it should still work. And you are going to type Winnie at gmail.com. Winnie is the password, click on login, and that's still going to work. So your program is still going to work. We simply had the grid there for testing purposes. Caitlin?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Right, but so don't think that you always have to have a grid. We've always written our applications and we put a grid on the form, right? But you don't have to have the grid there. In this instance, obviously you don't want the grid there. It makes no sense to have the grid. What's your thoughts, Caitlin, on this application?
I like this. I'm going to use it in my path. It's very helpful. Thank you, sir.
Josiah?
Yeah, I learned a lot, sir. Is this the only way that you would do a login, or are there other ways? I'm just curious.
I don't know. Look, there could be other ways, but this is essentially how you would want to do it. Even coding at an industry level, where you've got multiple users. Here we cater for an admin and just a normal user. You could have a manager role. You could have, a variety of roles. As long as we got this field and we type in the correct values in that field, then it's going to work. As I said, the only thing I don't like about this is I'd prefer if that field was an integer field. There's less likelihood of me making a mistake compared to typing in a role where there could be spelling mistakes that I could be making. Because as you saw in the application, it's case sensitive, right? So, even if I type user with a capital U and with a small u in another instance, I'm creating inconsistencies. Josiah?
I understand, sir.
Right, Karan?